Our inquiry question today is: how were enough men found to fight in World War I for Britain? So to start off with, I want you to think about three key words and see if you can define them at this point. The first one is recruitment, the second is conscription, and the third is conscientious objectors. Pause the video and see if you can define these three terms, and as we watch the video, please add to that definition. So first of all, how did Britain recruit men for the war? At the beginning of World War I, they had a small army of around 250,000 professional soldiers, which was clearly not going to be enough for the whole war. The Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener, wanted at least 1 million men, so clearly he had to do something quickly to try and recruit these men. So they set up recruitment offices in every town and city to try and persuade people to sign up, and many did. Politicians toured the country giving patriotic speeches to try and persuade people to join the war effort, and a whole propaganda campaign was put together with posters and pamphlets seeking to persuade young men to join the forces. And many did. The soldiers who did join were put into PALS battalions with people from their community, and in some cases it was a whole orchestra, a whole football team, or a whole large group from one community who would join up together and ultimately fight, and many of them die together. So how successful was this recruitment drive? Initially very, very successful. 500,000 people signed up in the first month alone. The recruiting officers were actually overflowing with people, and there was often not enough equipment, certainly not enough rifles to go around. By March 1916, 2.5 million men had volunteered, so clearly there was a lot of success in the recruitment drive. It did mean that Britain was a very different place, with whole villages emptied of men, many of whom would not come back. And by 1916, it became clear that although this drive had been very successful, more men would be needed, as the war was dragging on and on with a high amount of casualties. So, in January 1916, Parliament passed the first Conscription Act. Now, conscription was the process of forcing men to join up and join the armed forces. It made military service compulsory for all single men between 18 to 41. And within 3 months, that had been extended to include married men, as they simply did not have enough men. Now, by the end of the war, 1 in 3 men had been conscripted of that age, so clearly it had a large impact. It was also quite successful because it meant the government, because they choose who was conscripted, could avoid people in vital work such as mining and other areas important for the war effort. And it was also well liked in many ways because it was seen as fair, as all sections of society were conscripted into the armed forces. But the key question is, what happened if you did not want to fight? Now, people who did not want to fight were often referred to as conscientious objectors, or conchies, and these were people who would not fight for religious or moral reasons. Now, the government allowed this, but wanted to discourage it, so you had to convince a tribunal that you had genuine objections to the war, and it was not just that you were cowardly and did not want to fight. If you convinced the tribunal that you did not want to fight, you were assigned non-combatant roles such as driving ambulances or essential war work such as mining. However, if a tribunal was not convinced, they could force the conscientious objector to join, or ultimately they could have them shot for refusing to follow orders during wartime. People who refused to even help the war effort in non-combatant roles were imprisoned for the fact they wouldn't help. So why did men join up? Now, there's no easy answer to this because there's a broad range of reasons, But some of the main reasons cited are they were looking for some kind of sense of adventure. Most people had not been abroad, and most people had quite dull, boring jobs. Many people said they were persuaded by effective propaganda posters, that the government's campaigns persuaded them to fight. For many, it was a sense of duty and patriotism, and actually there was a lot of dislike towards Germany and a feeling that the British should fight them. And as I mentioned earlier, many people in Britain lived in poverty, and many were looking to escape this and have something more exciting in their lives. And part of this was this idea of glamour of the uniform and being in the army, and to a certain extent that people of the opposite sex would also be more attracted to you if you joined the army. One of the most effective propaganda campaigns displayed women and children looking longingly at the soldiers as they went off to war. And this really played upon the idea that it was glamorous and something very, very positive about being in the army. So, in summary, initially many men volunteered for the war, actually 500,000 in the first month as part of a very successful recruitment drive, which ultimately ends up with 2.5 million men, many of whom were organised into PALS battalions. But by January 1916, it was clear that merely volunteers was not going to be enough, and the government passed the Conscription Act. 1 in 3 men between 18 to 41 were conscripted during the war, but there were some conscientious objectors who refused to fight, who could be locked up or even shot for their beliefs. And lastly, that men joined up for a wide variety of reasons. Now I'd like to consider the impact of recruitment and conscription. Firstly, what impact do you think it would have on the country as a whole? Secondly, why do you think people who refuse to fight could be shot? And thirdly, what do you think would be the main reason people agreed to fight? Pause the video and consider these 3 questions. This has been a Flip Your History video. More information and more videos are available on TES if you search Flip Your History, or for more information about Flippedlearning and my Flippedlearning journey, go to Twitter at Flip Your History or my blog flippyourhistory.wordpress.com. Thank you for listening.